Okay, in the story, I've met this man. His name is Frank. He's told his wife and his teenage daughters he thought he might be gay, and they threw him out of the house.
Oh,
And this is when I meet. This is when I met him,
so
and
sad.
basically we just absolutely fell in love with each other. He moved in, and we're creating this great life together. And then I come home one day, and he's gone. Clothes are gone, stuff is gone, and I don't know what's happened to him. And I go through that, and this starts right after that. So
Okay.
that's the setup.
Do
And
you
he's
give us
very
an idea of
conservative.
how old you are too in this part of the story?
I'm 40ish.
Okay.
We're the same age.
Yep.
He's very, very conservative, Irish Catholic.
Yes.
Um, all right. A couple of weeks later, he called and asked if he could come over and explain everything. I made us a drink and sat across the room, a little afraid of him. He said his priest had taken him to a retreat upstate where he'd learned that although he thought he was in love with me, he couldn't have been because that's not possible for two men. And God was testing his faith, his vows to his marriage, his commitment to his children. And it wasn't my fault, but God had chosen me as the test. I listened. And when he finished, I said, "So that's it?" "Yes, I'm sorry, but I can't." "You know that's horseshit." "Yes." "And you still want to leave?" "No." "But I promised I'd never see you again. I shouldn't even be here. I need to go." He got up to leave, and I said, "Frank, please come over here and just sit with me for a minute." He did, as if that's what he'd been waiting to hear all along. And we cried, held on to each other, and finally I said, "Fuck it. If this is the end, let's send it out with a bang." We did, and continued to challenge God for the next 3 years.
Wow.
He didn't move back in, but we saw each other all the time, which was actually better to have some breathing space. And one night we were laying there, and there was something about his arms and his chest, even his hips. You know, I was sort of curled up inside them, and you know that sort of like that fog off in the distance you can't quite get to. And all of a sudden, I realized he felt exactly like my father had all those years ago. And I'd never had a father fixation that I was aware of. But suddenly I wanted to get on a plane and fly with him. And so when he had this business trip to Europe, I flew off with him, and Paris and Brussels and London, and that old cliche about being in love in Paris. It's not a cliche. And I took him to all my favorite places, and that tip of Montneuf, where you sit there under that ancient tree and look out over the river and the bridges and the city, and you know where couples go and make out. Of course, he would have died if I tried it on him. And when we checked into Brown's Hotel in London, the guy, oh God, the guy at the desk looked us over and he said, "Gentlemen, would you prefer two beds or one?" And Frank just froze. He was speechless. And I said, "One is fine." And the guy just wouldn't let up. And he said, "Very good, sir. Right away, sir. Brown's is just happy to oblige." It's like he wanted to be invited up there.
Yeah.
And, it took Frank most of the night just to recover from that. And, sorry, I just lost my place. Um, okay. But I had a surprise for him. I had arranged tickets to Phantom of the Opera, which were very hard to get at that time, but I did. And it was his favorite show. And one of the songs from it was our song, "Let Me Be Your Freedom." "Let daylight dry your tears. I'm here with you, beside you, to guard you and to guide you." And my God, to be that much in love and old enough to understand what a miracle it is. And after we got back, there was no question what we needed to do. And as a kindness to his wife, he asked me if I would come to the last counseling sessions, the closure. And so she could see I wasn't a monster and that he was in safe hands. It was 11 o'clock Saturday morning in Dobbs Ferry up the Hudson. And I knew what was at stake for him to ask me to do this. So I was just really very careful. And, I got this plain sedan to drive me up there, and I dressed very conservatively in this, corduroy with a patch, very English professor. And Dorman called up, Miss Brown, your car is here. I went down. It wasn't a sedan. It was this enormous white limo with a fucking jacuzzi and palm tree in the back, covered front to back with these flashing sort of multicolored strobe light things. I was like, what the fuck? People were stopped on the sidewalk, dumbstruck. And the driver got out, this little guy, and he apologized. He said this was the only car they had left, and there was a problem with the electrical, and he couldn't get the lights to stop flashing while the engine was running, and the pump had burnt out on the jacuzzi, so they drained it, and it was empty. So if I wanted to use, I said, no. I just got in that damn car, and thank God for tinted windows. Anyway, the address, when we got to the address, it was this kind of strip mall. And as we pulled up, in this flashing Carnival cruise ship, I saw people gaping at us from the window and saw that one of them was Frank. And I thought, oh shit, he's going to think I did this deliberately. And I went in and it explained the mix up, and he was just glaring at me. But I could see that, that wicked Irish grin right under that I had surprised him once again. Not so much his wife. It was just seething hatred. It was the first time I'd ever actually met her. And she was a small, hard woman in this frilly Laura Ashley dress. There were two counselors, another married couple. And we sat down. I saw on the wall that this was a Catholic counseling center. And the guy said, well, let's get started, Jerry. If you go first, and you could tell us in your own words why you're so determined to break up Frank's marriage.
Oh, wow.
And, first I thought I misheard, and I turned to Frank, and he was just shell-shocked. And I turned back to the counselor, and he had this arrogant, triumphant smile. I knew this wasn't a closure. This was an ambush. Mm-hmm. And I said, sure, I'll go. First of all, I did not break up Frank's marriage. They'd already thrown him out of the house and turned their back on him when I met him. What I did was take him in, give him a home, take care of him, help him pull his life back together, love him, care for him. What I did was save this man's life. And now that he's happy and he's found what he wants, you want to take it away from him. I turned to his wife. Why? You've already, it's not to save his soul. You've already trampled all over that. Why? Just let him go. She didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. And Frank just looked down and shook his head. He got up and I said, I came here to help, but I'm in no mood for a crucifixion. I went out and I don't know why. I climbed over the trunk and got in the jacuzzi and sat there with that fake palm tree and my corduroys and drove all the way back into town, waving at these laughing kids who would drive by. like I was some kind of clown. Phone was ringing when I got home, and he apologized. He hadn't expected it either, but his wife needed more time. She doesn't need more time, Frank. She's just trying to wear you down until you finally give up, and she has this whole team of these people to help her do it. I said I would never pressure you on this, and I won't, but you need to get very, very clear about the kind of life you want to live, because this is not about me and you. This is still about you and God.
Mm.
And I will fight for you as hard as I can. But this is not one I can win on my own. It's not God, it's me, he said. I'm just not as strong as you want me to be. It's not about strength, Frank. It's about cowardice, not yours. Just years and years of my own. And that time I hung up. We stayed together, but it was never the same. His son started to hear things at school and in church and more insidiously at home. And my life became complicated with the second art director and the struggle of that. And we're traveling all over the place together and just came very, very close sometimes. But I know I couldn't do it. And even though I knew I needed to, it's just as if just to get my head straight between who they were. They knew about each other, they played against each other, and there I was just stuck in the middle. A conflict with two wives, these kids, and these men who were just so self-conflicted, they could barely breathe. What was it about me? What did I do to these men? Was it some instinct for that particular frailty that just set off a pattern? Or something deeper? Did I go all the way back to that night in San Marcos, Texas, when I said I'd go live with my mother because I felt sorry for her? And what I really wanted to say was, I want to go live with Dad. It was just an endless, malevolent repeat of that, just having them ripped away time after time after time. Or was this just my role in all of it? Something exotic to be enjoyed for a while and then shoved aside as too troublesome. Often that happened in life, at work, everywhere. And that's when I bought the house in Southampton, all on my own. And when I was out there, Frank was at their place in Montauk, and he called. We talked, danced around, trying again, and he was going to come over, but he didn't. And there I was in this big empty house, just me and the cats. And I remembered how they would try to sneak between us when we were sleeping, and one of them would, stretch all the way out just to separate us as far apart as possible. And the other one would just lay there with her little paw on my cheek, just watching me, as if she knew what was coming. I heard he went to work for Kenneth Fitzgerald in the North Tower. And when it happened, I felt him. Through the second plane, the first collapse, the second, and that huge white cloud just racing and swallowing everybody up. Was he atomized in the middle of it and just flying around with all those pieces of paper, or had he made it out? Did he walk away? Maybe just kept walking, finally escaping all of us? He wasn't on any of the list. And I finally called the house because I had to know. She answered. After all this time, recognized my voice and hung up. So my fantasy is It's a knock on the door one day. And there he is, in that old suitcase. And a slightly wonderfully crooked Irish grin. He comes in, sets the bag down, and we give God one more run for him. Lights down, curtain.
Oh, Jerry. It's sublime. It's just beautifully done, and I need a minute, just a minute. Okay.
No, I'm okay. I just
You
I
okay?
had to do it. I'm sorry. I just had to let it
Oh,
go.
Jerry, please don't say you're sorry for giving us a performance that's raw and real. That is what solo performance is. It is asks a lot of us. It really does. And I knew you were up to the task. I would expect nothing less from you. And it's so um, heartbreaking, but it's so entertaining. It's riveting. I just see all these images. That's the thing. When you can get up on stage and you start to give us these pictures, we forget we're watching one man. We think we're watching a movie. Really wonderful. This thing that you did, I was so thrilled by, because when you connect, you don't diagnose yourself, which was great. You just ask, what is it? Why did I choose Frank? And then you give us the connection between having to choose your parents, and you relive that moment and that triangle that somehow you felt you were repeating, where you had to choose between which parent you could live with, and the constant being ripped apart. We feel the ripping apart. And that line about, I'm not here for crucifixion is just brilliant. It's so well written that it could even be like a short story. Like it's like a short story unto itself. It is so wonderful, and that love equals freedom. And so I want to ask you, with this story that you've created and shared with us, do you feel what the pulse of your story is? Do you know what the pulse of it is? Can you tell it to me in your words, what you think the pulse of this story is? The whole story, not just this story.
Yeah, I want to go live with Dad. To me, is the linchpin of this entire story, and it occurs to me that this is not a story about a man searching for love and never being able to find it. This is a story of a man surrounded by it, pummeled by it, and yet it keeps being taken away from him. And, through because of himself, because of other things. And it occurred to me also that, the parallel between this and the guy on the beach, the diplomat on the beach, is, with Frank, it was, I lost him to the church. And the diplomat, I lost to his government. So that there's a parallel there. So I need to go back and look at that again and see what's there that, I missed the first time, because this is like having my eyes open. It was a really transformative experience for me
Yeah.
to do this. And just be that honest. And also, I told a story, about the counselors and limo many, many times. And it's always been about, how clever I was, how articulate I was. And man, I just slammed those motherfuckers. No, no. It's one thing to put it down. It's another thing to write dialogue that's going to be a play.
That's right.
You have to go under it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized for the first time was how hard I was willing to fight for that man. And it wasn't just for us, it was for him. And I went back to that lyric and let me be your freedom. And I made the connection. It was the first time I made that connection in 40 fucking years. And that vision of him standing at the door just crystallized. And I knew that's how I had to end it. And
Let me ask you this, Jerry.
did that make any sense? I just
Oh,
feel like
yes.
I
No, it
ran a
makes
thing
a
here.
lot of sense. There's two things I want to say, and I want to say them carefully. One of the things I want to ask you is, um, do you see how you're so willing to fight for these good men, and how you tell the guy that it's between you and God, and I will fight for you, you say to him. What if you took that same thing that you said to him and said it to yourself in this story? What would that do to you?
I thought of that, and especially since I did that. Um, I don't know,
Okay, I want you to
you know,
think about it. You're so close.
but I will tell you this, and it doesn't really relate, but I worked on this over the last week and over the weekend, and yesterday with a client. I really told her the truth about these people she's been working with, and I finally got her to hear me. And as a result, because these people were just taking advantage of her, and as a result, I got more business from her. But it was the same thing. I wasn't willing to let those people do that to her,
Mhm.
and I don't know what that is. I don't know where it comes from.
Well, it's a lovely quality. It's a beautiful quality, and you can appreciate that about yourself. And I think you were born with it. I think it's like your true colors, for lack of better words. But I want you to think about, I want to ask you a question, and it might bug you a little bit. So, two things I was going to make a comment, and this comment is a little tricky because I'm not really being a writer guide. I consider myself a guide, not really a teacher. So I don't want to, so if I've crossed a boundary, you can just say, hey, not comfortable with that. But there is something that I can only personally relate to, is that this, the people, sometimes we play out certain things in our relationships. And I want to preface it with, we've done nothing wrong. We've done nothing wrong. But we have to play out sometimes certain traumas in our relationships in order to heal the biggest and oldest wound. And people come into our life, and there's joy, and there's drama, and there's chaos, and there's grief. And sometimes we survive the relationships, and wisdom is what's left. They don't stay, but wisdom is left. And sometimes we start to actually heal the biggest wound. And this idea that there was something fatherly about him is not unusual. Women often attracted to men that look like their father or exude something. I mean, there are qualities in my husband that remind me of my husband. I mean, of my father. We talk about getting screwed up with father, but like there are things we look for in people.
Mhm.
And so I want you to kind of maybe consider the possibility that we do internalize our parents. We do internalize um, wounds. We don't want to play them out, but we continue to play them out so that we can relive that pain again, because the pain is familiar. We're not like, hey, sign me up for pain, you look great, I'll be dating you, or I want to get in, I want you to live. We're not signing up for it. It is so complicated and yet so simple. And what I have found so incredibly moving about this story, it really gets me, is that, and I hope you'll think about it this way. I can't tell you how to feel, but this tragedy of you loving men that you can't have may not be a tragedy. It may be that you have acquired a gift and a wisdom to teach the world about what it means to value yourself and to learn from loves and losses, and that you are a triumph. You didn't lose at love. My God, you had this rich life and have a rich life and are having one as we speak. And that I would love to see you consider, I will fight for you Jerry Brown in this story at some point, because it's so beautifully written, this story, and it really, I don't think there isn't anyone here that wouldn't relate to it. So just something to consider.
Okay.
That love letter you wrote to yourself.
Yep. That very much fed into this, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could tell that.
Yes. No, it definitely did. And I wrote down another note here. This need for closure too. I'm sure we in the triangles that we create, and sometimes I've learned too, no closure is closure sometimes. And anyway, I have to get a little feedback from the gallery, because I feel like this was a bit of a performance, and I think we all need that. Please, I ask you guys to keep it short, because I do have to, pick my son up at 3:50, and I want to make sure everyone gets time to read. So please give some comments, some positive feedback, and some support to Jerry. Grace.
Yeah, Jerry, that was sublime on every level, in every sense of that word. Really redemptive, because you did fight for yourself. Your words saying, I want to go live with Dad, that's your survival instinct, but that's you also standing by yourself and fighting for yourself to get those words out, to get that truth out, to have your truth be okay. And it's okay to say, I want to go live with Dad. And when you said that, it just felt like everything poured out. And, I was just cheering. And the whole story revolved around that for me. And I'm floored hearing those words, because they're true. They're your truth. And we're seeing you stand in your truth. So thank you.
Beautifully put, Grace. Thank you. Yeah. Eric.
I think you speak to the soul of everybody. I mean, the way that you, and the way that you performed that, I thought it was, that was amazing. I mean, if you do that on stage, I think it's like you get awards and all kind of shit for that, man. I mean, that was amazing, dude. I couldn't, to be able to do that. I mean, that skill, just that, being able to, because even Mary Beth, she started answering you. She started answering you because she was just like, oh, we're having a conversation. That's how good it was, man. That's how it's like you were having a conversation with us. That is it. I can't wait.
That's when I know I'm loving a movie or something. My husband goes, shut up, I can't hear this guy. And I'm like, oh, and my husband's like, stop it, we're at the theater. I'm like, that's when you know I'm in.
Yeah. And then the message. The ups and the downs again. Your life's extremes. It's the most incredible experience with the biggest heartbreak. That's what you get when you fall in love with somebody in Paris. It's going to break your heart a lot worse than if you fall in love with them in Texas, right? Let's just be honest. Come on. Shit, man. You've been, that shit's just way cooler. McDonald's, where I live at, it's all right. But hell, I'm glad I met my wife in Rio. It was a lot more fun falling in love.
Eric, you are priceless. I love that comment. It's so great.
Thanks, man. That was
wonderful. I'm going to go to Albert. Albert.
Jerry, I think you need to take some writing lessons. Jerry, it was so exquisite. I had an acting teacher. If they would have heard this, they would have said, it's Christmas. It's when magic happens. It's Christmas. I think you were putting your ear towards the speaker. It's so great. And in review, I don't have that much time, but there's always this crucifixion going on. You're being split apart from childhood on. You're going to show up, was it Dobbs Ferry? You're going to show up there ready for resolution and peace. And they send you a party car, which doesn't work. And then you get up there, you say, I came up here to help a healing, not for crucifixion. It's the being torn all along the way, and then asking yourself, why, God, am I always, what did I write down? Malevolent repetition. When am I going to know true love for myself or peace for myself so that I stop doing this? I had I had a nerve test one day, and the doctor happened to have conducted one on my sister. And she said, your sister has a high tolerance for pain. And this may not apply to you, but children of alcoholics have a high tolerance for pain. So even now I'm like going, well, I don't think I need, that's really, it's not that it's uncomfortable, it's causing me pain.
Hmm.
So I need to stop. And so it's another addiction of another kind to keep me away from me. So it's really great work, Jerry. It's you can't put another bar on the weight. There's no more heavier lifting here than this. It's really great work.
Yeah, I agree, Albert. And everything you said is really true about that. So the thing about these pieces, you guys, is that we get to grieve and we get to move through it. And ultimately, my desire for you is not to see yourselves as victims. That's my desire. That
Not
doesn't
to see
mean
ourselves as what?
we don't want to see that. My desire is that you never see yourselves as victims. That
Oh.
doesn't mean that you don't get victimized along the way. And it
Right.
doesn't mean that we don't grieve it, get angry about it, and have a lot of feelings about it. And at the end, we can't have a triumph of any kind. So triumphs are in grades. In other words, the triumph can be that you have experienced love, you've given love, and now it's time to give it to yourself. In other words, it doesn't have to be a burning bush. It doesn't have to be a big epiphany, because the idea of finding closure around the traumas and the victimizations of our lives doesn't always come from others, but we can give it to ourselves. And what I see through your story, Jerry and Albert and Eric and Grace, I see this healing, and you're doing it in an artful way, which is really challenging. And it's really coming across. And I'm excited for you, Jerry. Yeah, this is beautiful, beautiful acting, beautiful writing. I see this on the stage easily, and it's going to be fun to perform too. So,
Well, just thank you, all of you, for letting me do this today. I was really scared.
well, you rose to the occasion, and it's so great that you get to be scared here, because eventually, we're going to move you on a little further, and eventually you're going to have, a play, and then it's going to be rehearsals, and then you're going to be off book, and then it's going to be previews and opening night. And so these little fears we get to work out slowly, one piece at a time. And by the time it comes, you're like, man, I'm terrified, but I'm ready.
Mm. Okay.
Okay. Beautiful. Keep it up. Awesome. If you have any questions on where you want to go next, just let me know and we'll discuss it further. Okay.